Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast, AI and Wealth Management. We're going to be covering tools, trends, and investment opportunities in artificial intelligence and really what it means for everyone that's joined us today. I'm Zeno Mercer with RoboGlobal Vetify, where I lead research in robotics and AI across the globe, covering and researching for the RoboGlobal Automation Index and Think Artificial Intelligence Index. So today, we're going to be covering what AI adoption looks like for advisors and wealth management firms, how AI tools are transforming client engagement and practice efficiency, and the top AI-driven technology trends to watch in 2024 and beyond, and practical strategies for investing in companies driving this change in AI innovation. So some quick housekeeping on the screen. As you can see, you can ask questions. So there's a Q&A box on the bottom right corner of the screen. Please feel free to ask questions throughout, either now or when they pop up. We will have time for Q&A at the end, but if the question is tactically relevant to what's happening on screen, we'll try to integrate it. We'll have interactive polls throughout. This will help guide the conversation, so please do participate, and you'll see why when we get there. And don't worry, if you miss anything, there will be a recording of this sent via email after the session. And lastly, there is a survey and CE certification widget on the bottom of the screen. So please participate and do both of those if relevant to you. Now, let's dive into the exciting world of AI and wealth management. So kind of high level, some food for thought. I was doing some research here, and there were 15,000, maybe 1,500, 500 SEC registered RIAs managing about $130 trillion in assets. That's enough to provide one robot butler for nearly all 8 billion people on the planet if we price it at 15,000 each. That's a big market. And that's a lot of money and a lot of people that are in the space that are, about to be impacted and utilizing this technology. And so, while we wait for these robot housekeepers, there are already countless ways to utilize and use AI today in your practice. So I'm joined by two experts that are actually making this AI-powered future reality. They're, already showing use cases. They're showing people how to do it. They're the real deal. And so today I'm joined by Mike Casciano from Evo Wealth Consulting and Parker Ence from Jump AI. Hey, guys.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Hi, Zeno.
Hey. Yeah, really, I think everybody here will have fun today talking about this, since it's really not just what's on the news, but it's really here. And maybe Parker, perhaps we could dive into this. Maybe what are some of the basics of generative AI, and what does this mean for advisors today?
Yeah, so just quick background. So I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of a company called Jump. And as part of what we do, we're working every day with RIAs and independent broker dealers and then large enterprises around how do we actually take AI and implement it and make it useful for advisors. And I think what we've observed over the last few years since we got into this is there is actually a lot of confusion around what AI means. AI has been around in one shape or another since the 80s, but there's sort of this recent wave of AI called generative AI that's a little bit different from what came before. And so I want to just actually walk you through a couple of slides to explain a little bit about when we talk about AI is going to change everything, how might that actually happen? And so let me start with a game that hopefully everybody is familiar with. If you've ever played the game Name That Tune, I'm going to use that as an example for how some of these technologies work. So Zeno, we could really put you on the spot and make you do some karaoke and sing us some songs, which don't worry, we're not going to do. But you could start singing a song, and our brains, as we've kind of grown up from being a kid to being an adult, we've been exposed to all these different songs and we've heard different genres of music, rock and roll, pop, country, etc., classical. And so our minds, our human intelligence, have been trained to sort of categorize and classify what are all of these songs that we've heard and how do we sort of group them in our minds. So if you started singing some Taylor Swift, most of us would immediately be able to classify, okay, that's pop, that's Taylor Swift, and maybe even be able to name the song. And so that's sort of how, your brain would handle the challenge of classify that tune or name that tune. And so if you think about kind of the most basic form of prediction, if you are familiar with like a Monte Carlo simulation or just a simple regression, that's kind of the most simple form of prediction using the same type of technology as modern day AI. So you can think about, we could take a bunch of weather readings over time and develop a best fit line, and then that would help us to potentially predict what the weather might be. So, I'm sitting here today just outside of Salt Lake City. We've got a big storm coming in. We could look at past years of weather, et cetera, to try to predict some weather. So that would be a very simple version of that. And so then we get to kind of the last generation of AI, which was the predecessor to the generative AI era. And that was a type of AI called structured learning. So the way that works is you take a bunch of data and you label it. So this example that you see is something in the domain of AI called computer vision. And so you can see we've got all these different cat pictures. So you could take a database of cats and you could label them. This is a cat, this is a cat, this is a cat. And then you could feed that into an AI model and say, here's a picture, it's a cat. Here's a picture, it's a cat. And then that would be kind of the training phase of that model. And then after that, you could show it a new picture of something that it had never seen before. And you could say, is this a cat? Yes or no. And on the right-hand side, you actually see a picture of my kid's cat trying to eat my kid's fish. But you could basically ask the computer, is that a cat? Yes or no. And so this is a pretty common use case of AI, and it's pretty simple. It's just leveraging a data set of annotated data and then trying to make a prediction around, is this the same as something that you've seen, even if you've never seen it before? So this is, you'll see this used in all kinds of kind of fun ways. There's a pizza factory that they're kind of making ready baked pizzas, and they'll send the pizzas down a conveyor belt and they'll have a camera on those pizzas, and then they've got this database of good looking pizzas and ugly pizzas, and then it gives a pass fail score to each of those. So that'd be kind of a simple example. One way that you'll see this used, and I'm sure Michael might talk about this in a little bit, one way you'll see this used within the domain of wealth management is you've got all of this data that's sitting in your databases about your clients, what investments they have, what activity they've taken. And some of the very large wealth management firms, especially the big banks, they'll use a version of this structured learning to predict things like next best action. They'll kind of compare clients that are doing all the things that the wealth managers would like them to do, and then kind of use that to identify opportunities to kind of reach out to them. So that would be one example of how that's used in wealth management. So then we kind of start thinking about generative AI and how that's a little bit different. So in generative AI, we're not just classifying, but we're actually predicting what should come next. And so, we could make Zeno do some more karaoke and have him sing the first line of a song, and then we would all guess what's the next line. It'd be like a fill in the blank. And so that would be getting a little bit closer to generative AI. And the way that works is we actually take basically the contents of the internet, and for every phrase or word, all of those words can be put into something which is called an embedding. An embedding is essentially a mathematical expression for language. So you could think of something like the word cat, or house, or man, or king, or queen, and that would be expressed in mathematics. If you remember from back in high school when you had to do matrices math and you thought, I'll never use that. Well, there's engineers and AI researchers that are using that every day, and they put them into something called a vector. And the reason that that's important is because when you express those concepts in terms of these vectors, and inside of these embeddings, you can actually measure the distance between those words or those concepts. So you can see some examples here where maybe cat and kitten are mathematically close to each other. They're kind of by dog because those are both animals, but they're a little bit different, etc. So what that allows us to do is actually use math to predict what should come next. And so, you can think about with generative AI, it's not classification, it's not prediction, but it's actually creating new original content. So we could make Zeno sing a made-up song that he wrote, and then AI could actually fill in the rest of that, which is pretty cool. And the way that it does that is by essentially predicting what should come next given this prompt language. So here's an example of, we could feed in the words jingle bell, and then essentially the large language model is going to predict what should come after jingle bell. Maybe there's a 90% chance that it should be jingle bells. So jingle bells, jingle bells. Maybe there's a 7.5% chance that it should be jingle bell rock. Maybe there's a 2.5% chance it should be jingle bells, Batman smells, or something like that. So it's essentially just using statistics to guess what should the next phrase or word be based on what I was given. And so because of this, we're able to take messy language data that was previously sort of impossible to deal with in software. And we're able to automate things that were never possible to automate before. And this technology really hit a tipping point as of kind of late 2022 with a company called OpenAI launching software or an AI model that was called GPT-3. And since then, there have been additional models. But that was really kind of the first time that people realized we all realized, wow, there's so much more that we can do. So we started thinking about how do we move this into wealth management. And there are all of these things that we do every day when we're working with clients or we're kind of doing our office work that are, it's all unstructured data. It's conversations that we have, it's email messages, text messages, documents and forms, and it's all kind of messy data. So then we spend a lot of time using human intelligence to read that data and move it somewhere, maybe move it into a database in the financial planning system or the CRM or the investment management system. And this takes up a bunch of time. Kitsis has essentially said advisors spend about 1/3 of their time on all this meeting admin. And so it's kind of like a big pain and a big time suck for advisors. And so I think what's really cool is that we have this opportunity to automate a lot of those things that were not possible to automate before. And I'm just using one example here with meetings because that's where we spend a lot of time at Jump. But you can kind of look at the evolution where, man, I've got all of this time that I have to prepare for my meeting. I've got all this work I do after the meeting. I can kind of power through it. I can hire an assistant to help me scribe. I can do a dictation service. There's kind of these generic AI tools. And I think for us, what's really exciting is there are now the rise of these industry-specific AI tools that are designed to help automate a lot of this. And I'll just share a couple of these, a couple of case studies. So we recently launched a partnership with LPL, and in their pilot, they basically said, we're applying these generative AI techniques to preparing for the meeting and then automating some of the post-meeting work. And they came back saying, advisors are saving 1 to 2 hours per day, which is pretty amazing. And so then you start to think about, well, how do you reallocate that time? So we saw another RIA that was based in California. They looked at this and they also launched some generative AI techniques to help with meetings. And they found that the advisors that were using these were able to do somewhere between 20 to 50% more work for their clients. So think of all the different deliverables you might do for a client in using these AI techniques. So I think that there's just a lot of exciting progress here, a lot of opportunities to automate things that were previously impossible to automate.
I mean, those are some pretty big numbers and increases of productivity. And obviously, we're looking at a lot of lifestyle changes too, as well. Just like, you mentioned the administration work that goes on behind the scenes. That's a lot of the work. And I mean, it's true with life in general. Like, we're going to see AI improving lots of our life, but especially, as you mentioned, with, the LPL case study, what are some of the things that you see, like feedback that, you're getting? Like, obviously there's the numbers, but, maybe are there kind of like any, beyond that, like, okay, here's like the absolute improvements, but like, what about kind of quality of life? Are there any comments on that?
Yeah, so we did actually, just last week, we ran a survey with the Jump users, and we essentially asked them, okay, so first of all, tell us how much time you're saving. And then second, tell us how you're reallocating that time. And it was really interesting to see the spread there. So I think the common feedback was, if I turn on some of this generative AI capability through Jump, generally I'm going to save about 50% of my meeting admin time. I'm going to kind of cut that out right away. And then the other cool thing about these generative AI technologies is that you can actually customize them quite well. So you could actually get the outputs to sound like you. And so we found that the firms that took the time to customize the outputs were able to save maybe 3/4 of the administrative time that was related to meeting admin, which is awesome. So then we said, okay, great. Well, then now you've got a few extra hours per day or per week. How are you reallocating that? And it was pretty interesting because I'd say it was about half and half. About half said, I'm spending that on going to find new clients, or I'm spending it on kind of putting together more deliverables for my clients, basically doing more work. And then the other half said, I'm actually reallocating this to get back my Friday afternoon and night, and to get back my Saturday, and actually go have better work-life balance. Because I was sitting there Friday night typing in all my meeting notes for the week and trying to strain to remember, now what did I say to Zeno on Tuesday morning? Kind of trying to relive all that, which is not generally how you want to spend your Friday night. So I thought it was kind of interesting to see both directions.
Yeah, those are some pretty big life enhancements there. Now, maybe switching over to Mike over at Evo Wealth, and he can, maybe give a little bit more background about himself and what he's up to. But maybe let's dive into, okay, these tools are here. What's the current state of adoption of AI tools in wealth management? Hey, Mike.
Hey, Zeno. Thanks a lot for having me on. It's great to join you and my friend Parker to talk a little bit about the term AI, but how it's relating to wealth. So my background, I started as an advisor, hardest job ever. Did that for a little bit, and then went to work with BlackRock, a large asset manager, for a long time. Worked a lot with advisors across all different channels. So I was fortunate, literally I've worked with probably 3,000 to 4,000 advisors at least, and have seen into their businesses and being one. So it was a great background. And then we launched Evo Wealth Consulting because we just saw this need. There's all kind of tech out there. It's not being widely adopted. And I think that kind of dovetails into our conversation specifically about AI. So when we look today, as far as how that conversation's unfolding, I think AI, we're doing the whole kind of wealth finance thing where we pick a term and go crazy about it. So if you think back a couple of years, like everybody was talking about direct indexing. And direct indexing became a name that was applied to anything close to direct indexing. So I think we're doing the same thing in terms of AI, where we say, hey, you got to use AI, or AI is going to solve it, or prepare for AI, and if you don't, you're in trouble. But I don't really think we're seeing advisors actually engage directly with AI. I think sometimes they might dabble with like a chat GPT or something like that, but they've got sensitive information. So they've got to be very careful from a compliance perspective of like where that information is going to be. How do they keep that client information private? As well, I think if you look at the nature of our industry, you really got to think about the different segments or types of advisors and firms that are out there. One of the things that's interesting is it takes a really long time to build a successful business, right? It doesn't happen overnight. There's very few advisors that go from managing 0 to 100 million in 2 years. So what we often see is where the larger concentration of assets are with advisors that are older, 50, 60. they've been doing this since they were just originally buying stocks and bonds, and that was the whole deal of being, a broker. So what we get is oftentimes a very, you can call it kind of unstructured process. It's their own process that has evolved through time of how they service clients. And right now, when we have all this really cool tech and solutions that are out there, it involves a lot of change. And a lot of the advisors, I mean, things are going pretty well. So I don't think a lot of them are saying, hey, I really need to do better, or we need to run more clients, or we need, like, I think some of them aspire to growth, but it's a huge lift to start integrating or implementing, or even just understanding what technology is out there. So while we have this massive proliferation, we're not really seeing a ton of adoption. When we think specifically about AI, and there's a reason why Parker went through and covered that part, because he understands stuff really well. He's CEO, he's built this a few times. AI doesn't mean everything tech. Well, AI is tech. All tech is not AI. And so where we're seeing adoption is through advisors that want it as part of a pre-built or outsourced or managed product or solution. So we have a couple slides that we can flip through and help us put some color on. There we go. This is some studies from about 2 years ago, but they apply today. So both through Orion and Michael Kitces. But the advisors will admit they don't feel like they have the tech solutions they need. So roughly 10% are like, yeah, we've got all the tech we need. Only about 2/3 of the tech that's purchased, and so if you think about large enterprises or even smaller firms, only about 2/3 actually even being used. We use that term tech debt. It's real. Like, there's a ton of it out there. When you think about big firms, somebody might want something. Oh, I need that. Okay, we'll buy that for them, but then no one else uses it. And as that kind of compounds, or they get new stuff and get off the old, there's a lot of legacy, outdated tech within the infrastructure that's just sitting idle. And then the big one too is, like, most of the tech's not even being used. About 12% is used to its fullest capabilities. A lot of advisors in terms of process may not even know, like, the tech that they already own can do a lot of cool things. So we're at the starting point where there's a lot of manual processes. It works okay, but when you think about that leap, it's almost like the J curve. Right? You need to invest time, money to reorient your process to incorporate new tech. And a lot of times that lift is hard. And so we see them sticking with kind of status quo. If you flip to the next slide,
it's a really good point where it's kind of like like recapping what you're saying. There's almost like if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it. But a lot of people maybe don't know what's out there, or even if they kind of get into it, they don't know how to get there. And I think you guys are doing a great job kind of showing that there are tools out there that can be used, and maybe you don't think your process is broken, but you're spending a lot more time thinking about and having to spend time doing certain tasks that you don't really have to do anymore. All right, so I'm gonna hand it back to you. All right, let's see.
Yeah, so most advisors run a pretty consistent platform of technology. It's been around for a while. They use it. This is improving through enhancements that the firms or the products they already have are creating there, but it's pretty consistent, right? I mean, there's a CRM, there's trading, there's risk management, compliance, reporting, billing, et cetera. So as we look to this next step, if you go to the next slide, it's really about what's the really cool solutions you can use to enhance your existing infrastructure to improve it without having to go through a big process of changing or tearing down or rebuilding. It's almost filling in these gaps. So in some of these areas that are good opportunities, I mean, obviously there's a huge need right now for cybersecurity, cyber compliance with new regulations. Right? So what can we use there that's going to help? There's a lot of options within portfolio management, portfolio design, marketing. How do we engage clients? There's a lot of new planning light tools, new investment solutions that can be powered by tech. So under all of that, there's a lot of opportunity. The problem, as we mentioned, if we go to the next slide, is the pace of evolution for technology is growing way faster than any firms have the ability to actually implement it. So there was a term, Martec's law, talking about technology within marketing. That curve is accelerating, right? It's growing exponentially. But it takes time to implement tech. And I think we see this paralysis around AI adoption because, and rightfully so, do these firms have the expertise, especially when we get to smaller firms, to go out and vet this? Do they have the time to do the due diligence? Do they even know of all the options that are out there? And then as well, when they make that decision, okay, how long is it going to take to implement? 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? What's the cost going to be? And then I think a big one is like, what happens if a better tech comes out 6 months down the road that may be faster, less expensive, is easier to integrate or work with other applications? So I think we're in this kind of holding pattern a bit where firms are tentative about investing in new technology or investing in changes to their process because they're unsure of how fast that pace of innovation is going to continue and will there be something better. So what we're really trying to work on is, okay, let's identify where the biggest challenges, roadblocks are for existing businesses. Now, for smaller ones, it's definitely around process and manual tasks, right? How do we manage more clients or be more efficient? You're going to need to automate a lot of these manual processes. Parker being on, I think one of the easiest entries into AI is something like a digital assistant or a note-taking app that can facilitate things that take time. You have to pay attention to them. But if you can automate that in a way to improve efficiency and be more dialed into meetings and then populate those notes to a CRM, where now you have documentation and you know what your follow-ups are, like that is a huge improvement. I think it gets advisors comfortable. If you look to the other end of the spectrum, there's AI that'll build portfolios on the fly that you can speak to and say, this client likes these type of sectors or these themes, and it'll embed that and create a portfolio, and then that would send out to your order management system. We are in like the way sub 1% that would even consider doing that right now. So I think we're on this kind of curve of starting with technology that has the actual AI embedded in it that will perform these functions and get advisors comfortable before like we really start seeing this impact. At the larger firms, we're definitely seeing, things like next best actions or where they're hiring out people and creating it embedded within their existing systems to help drive that or harness the data to make better decisions. But we're still early across the board in terms of like real AI in a visible way impacting advisors.
No, that's a good point. I think like it's a good time to segue into like let's maybe hear from the audience where, we've mentioned a couple things. You obviously have your own unique workflows, challenges, and situations that we've addressed. Like, what are some areas that you're most interested in using AI? Like, if you could, wave a magic wand or have a superpower in one of these areas, which thing do you want us to talk about? I mean, this is we're going to dive into whatever gets the most options to start off the bat. So let's see, we've got, okay, still pulling in some questions. Okay, it's like a bag of popcorn. It starts off slow and then it starts to pop a lot. Okay, give it a few seconds. So yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see, and everybody will see the answers to this poll, but they won't see how you responded individually. Okay, so let's see. So Mike and Parker, let's discuss this. Okay, so it seems like, the client engagement CRM is number one with 36%, and then efficiency research, and then, it kind of makes sense that trading and portfolio management was a little bit lower, but and then someone Andrew Hart added downloading statements and entering data into performance reporting for private investments. Okay, that's a little bit separate, but like we can tie that into maybe the kind of research part.
Yeah, just one comment. So I think this is very consistent with what we see. So I think what we've seen is generative AI kind of hit awareness in early 2023. That's and that it hit awareness because that's when the SEC came out and started cautioning about this or that, right? So that's how that we kind of had peak awareness. And so I think what we've seen is advisory firms, whether it's independent RIAs, independent broker dealers, or even the kind of the largest institutions in our industry, they said, okay, AI is here to stay. we believe that the human connection between advisor and client is here to stay. And so while there might be many technology firms coming out saying, hey, we're going to replace kind of advising with the robots, I think that's actually not, like, our view is that that's actually not what's going to happen. So I think the human connection, when it comes to the most critical decisions that you make in your life around planning for retirement, planning for legacy, planning for your kids' college funds, safety, security, freedom, there's some human element there that our point of view is that'll never go away. So then the question becomes, how do we help advisors augment? How do we build the Iron Man suit to help them kind of do more? And what we see here in the poll is very much mirroring what we've seen, which is, okay, number one, I've seen ChatGPT, I've seen Microsoft Copilot. How do we get a safe, compliant version of that for me as an advisor? And that's usually, in our experience, the first place that firms will start. So that touches on personalizing communication to some extent. That touches on content creation, and it touches on research. And the best solution there is some kind of internal version of a ChatGPT-like chatbot that will actually pull on your own documents. So what we see the most there is it's Microsoft Copilot is a pretty common solution there, and that's because a lot of firms feel good about kind of the security posture there and the privacy posture there with Azure, et cetera. So we see that as a pretty popular approach. ChatGPT has a business version that is safe as far as using client PII. It's a paid version. It's not the free version, but that one is interesting because you can load in documents and you can have it kind of utilize your firm's documents. So we see that as pretty interesting. There are a couple startups that are trying to do a version of this that is for advisors. There are a few of those. One's called Advisor X. There's a couple others. So I think those are interesting to check out. So that's what we sort of see as step one. That's kind of low-hanging fruit. So then you step back and you say, okay, are we ready to let the robots do trades and build portfolios and all of this for us? And typically no, right? So you can actually see that's reflected here. It's like 3.5% are ready for that. And I think there's good reason for that. I don't think that our systems are ready for that yet. So what's the next step? So I think the next step is efficiency, operational efficiency, and getting help with client interactions. And I think this is why our particular category has been a really hot one over the last year. It's applying generative AI to meetings. So imagine having an assistant that gives you a briefing before you show up to the meeting. It pulls on all your old CRM data and helps you get ready, reminds you of all the personal touch that you'd want to remember, says things like, hey, don't forget to ask about the new golden retriever, or ask how the vacation to Hawaii went, those kinds of personal things that help with relationship building. And then after the meeting, it takes in the data during the meeting and it organizes it so it's very easy to push into the CRM. It drafts the follow-up email. It drafts up the compliance note so that there's a high quality note for every client, every advisor, every meeting. It pulls out all the financial planning data so that it's very easy to organize. And so I think that's where we're seeing a lot of demand there. And that's, I think, reflected in the poll.
Yeah, I'll hit on Glenn Williams had asked for a little more examples, and yeah, I agree 100%. So if we think about it, there's really two approaches when you want to move more towards incorporating AI and tech, right? It's, do we want to address this entirely across the infrastructure of the firm, or do we want to fill gaps with specific technology? So if you're really looking at something big and you want to really move the needle, you got to start by owning your own data, right? Create your own data warehouse, be able to take that in, create the infrastructure so you can work with a lot of firms, like a dispatch, a mile marker that'll help you do that. And that's going to create a lot more flexibility and usability of that data, because that's where AI really shines. If we think about some of the gaps where then you could address within existing, a lot of this could be around marketing, right? What type of content are you creating, and then how are you delivering that content? You can work with firms like a financial that will deliver a client portal using a lot of technology and AI to get that right to your client's phone, right? So creating an app that's more future forward looking, it's going to meet clients where they are, using technology to power that, using AI to create content, allows you to help kind of streamline this, and then using automations in terms of that prospect generation to then come up with workflows of how you're going to communicate with them. Do you send emails? When are you going to be notified that they might be a qualified prospect? You can go out and get better data on prospects. You can use firms like a Wellfeed or Affinity that are using AI to scrape all the data from places like LinkedIn and Facebook and firm sites. And they could tell you, like, okay, I want to search for clients that are in a certain city in Dallas that have recently sold a business and that are between 40 and 50 years old and have more than $2 million in net worth outside of that business sale and went to this college. And you can pull all that stuff in, and now all of a sudden you have a prospect list. Well, then what are you gonna do with the prospect list? Well, then you put it through that portal and start reaching out to them. So there's a lot of ways you can pull data in, but there's a lot of varied providers that specialize in these niches, which is gonna take a little bit of time to understand, like, what are you trying to solve for? How do we pull that in? But there's a lot of new financial planning, light software that's utilizing AI to bring that data in for clients. And then how are you showing that to them and prospects? Okay, here's all of your holdings. Here's all, like something like an asset map of utilizing, here's all of your liabilities. Here's all of your beneficiaries. Here's your plan. And then how do we take that data and move it into deeper planning, or using things like estate planning to go ahead and screen, and like some of the questions about the documents. Okay, we're going to pull in all of your estate planning documents and your insurance and the trust, everything out, and we're going to use AI to scrape that and come up with like next best actions or things to look at, or what might need revision. So allowing this to help you run your business instead of doing it manual or outsourcing or hiring more people. Like if it's an area of focus that you want to work on, you can find the tech that will do it for you and then embed it into your existing process. So you're pushing that data out, understanding how that data is then outputted from that application and moving it to the next step of the process. You can build your own custom indexes with a company like Syntax. Like you can use a company like Vetify for custom indexes. Like there's all kind of things you can do. There's more and more coming out every day. It really comes down to where are you having the challenges and goals within your business, and then identifying what technology and process enhancements could really improve that.
I like where we're going with both this, and I think there's the question that it seems like people are having is kind of like, okay, are there off-the-shelf tools? Where do I get started? And I'm sure a lot of this depends on what the existing kind of tech stack and processes of these firms are. So maybe it's like, what should they be looking at first? And is it more case by case, or are there off-the-shelf tools that are vetted and validated for wealth management already, and across these different segments? Some people are using ChatGPT and Claude and others for content creation. If it's not including confidential information, that's probably fine. You obviously can get more in the weeds and like get enterprise versions that don't share data. So, I mean, maybe some comments on that off the shelf versus bespoke, particularly in this space.
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. So we think of a scorecard that you can use to kind of evaluate if a tool is going to be very helpful for you. As with any technology category, you're going to have, you think of kind of a 2x2 matrix. There are going to be some tools that are horizontal. They're made for everybody. That's like a Microsoft Excel, right? And anyone can use Excel for almost anything. And then there are tools that are very, very specific to the industry. So you could build financial plans in Excel, or you could go build financial plans in eMoney or Right Capital or something like that. So that's the first piece is the solution really, really targeted to my industry? And then the second is, they're kind of cheap, good enough solutions, and then there are more premium, holistic solutions. And so I think that's kind of how to think about these things. We have a scorecard that we recommend, which is first, how much do you care that this is industry specific? So, in a lot of cases, it doesn't matter. Like ChatGPT is actually going to be pretty great at most generic tasks. And that could be good enough, and it's pretty low cost. So that might be fine. If you're getting into more technical aspects of financial planning, et cetera, then an industry focused tool probably makes more sense. So the first thing is, how much do I care that it's specific to the industry? The second is, how much do I care about integrations? So, a big value proposition of AI is it's going to save me a lot of time. If there aren't good integrations, then you're going to spend a lot more time copying and pasting. So looking at what's your existing tech stack, can the AI tool plug into all of that? As an example, that's something that we focused on, integrating into all of the CRMs, for example. So Salesforce, Redtail, Wealthbox. It just is great when you can just click a button and save things into your existing systems versus have to have two screens open and doing a bunch of copying and pasting. So integration is a big deal. The third one that we look at is customization. So in a lot of cases, the more that you can tailor the AI outputs to match your style, your format, your tone of voice, and kind of teach it to be your shadow, that's actually really, really helpful from a time savings perspective, because you're not editing and rewriting things, and also just how effective it is. So a lot of these tools will allow you to kind of train them or kind of learn your style. So that becomes really important. And then finally, I would say, we're operating in a heavily regulated industry. And so picking a technology that has the security posture that you need, that's going to be okay with your chief compliance officer, and has all the modern techniques around, SOC 2 Type 2 protocol, and protecting the sensitive data that comes in, making sure that when the AI model touches any of your sensitive PII from your clients or from your firm, that it's not learning from that data in a way that could leak. So that's a super important consideration as well. So you can ask the technology partner, are you going to be using any of that data to train models or retain that data in some way that some other user might have access to it? And it seems really obvious, but a lot of these new AI tools actually do learn from the data in that way. So that'd be something to avoid.
Yeah, I think as well, there's a ton of due diligence needed. So what we're finding is, like, the newest best solutions, it takes a while to get integrated if you're looking at, okay, there's all these different platforms and CRMs and systems. So it takes a while. They're not integrated right out of the box because there's so much demand for this. And Parker, clearly you talked about it, you went through it. Like, it takes time to be on, we're going to get integrated with Orion, and we're going to get integrated with this CRM, and we're going to have the data feed from Fidelity and be up there. Like, it takes a while. So you're going to have to go out and conduct the due diligence yourself around what are the problems we're trying to solve for. You can use tools like OpenVRM as a new solution where it's going to have all of that, the vendor due diligence you need to do, aggregated. So they're bringing in that from all these new tech companies and posting in one central location. So that's super helpful if you're creating this on your own, to make sure that you're following the regulations and providing that documented due diligence of technology. The other thing that we see that's probably gets the most wow appeal is now that you're able to incorporate voice into some of these solutions, right? So there are CRMs out there that you can say, find me all of my clients that have Apple as an individual holding, right? Or which of my clients have a birthday coming up in 2 weeks? Like, being able to speak to it, it's no different than writing it out, but it's now becoming a really cool thing. And there's a firm out there that does really complex portfolio management called Allocate Right, where you could speak to it. Find me the bonds that are within this state that have these characteristics. This stuff is happening really fast, faster than I think most of us can even keep track of. But your challenge is always going to be determining what's the lift of how this will work within my existing infrastructure. What's the time frame until it's maybe more integrated? Should we wait for that? But I do think if you really want to move forward and get ahead of the curve and have a differentiated solution, being able to start incorporating more AI tools that are cutting edge, if you have the ability to own your own data and your own infrastructure, that takes a lot of those challenges of integration off the table. And that's where I would focus on. If you're, I think at 500 million is now, it's economically feasible to own your own data as you work through one of these providers that can help manage that for you. And then they're going to do a lot of the hard work of what we call data translation, meaning you want to use this certain technologies in a process. They're all going to be formulated into one type of way that the output of that data comes out. And then the other one's going to require it to be in a different format for the input. And so that these underlying data warehouse firms, they do a lot of that work in the data translation, saying, okay, we know that the data has to be, it comes out in this format, we've got to get it to this format, so now we can feed into the next application. So if you really want to go down that road, I would start first kicking tires on those type of companies, because that's going to help speed up not only how much tech you can take on and how long it'll take to integrate it or get it activated in your process. It then makes it very easy to then swap things out as they may get better and evolve, because you don't have to do that traditional data migration of taking all of it out here and then reestablishing it into a new solution. It's all there within your, they call it like a data lake. So now you're just accessing the existing data, and those firms that are help build those data lakes or data warehouses, they're doing a lot of that heavy lift.
I think this is a good time to segue to our next poll. And you know, we've presented a couple different paths forward, you know, choose your own path, do your own research, a number of different things, you know, working with consultants and, you know, vetted technologies. Maybe let's get a pulse from the audience of what's stopping you from adopting AI. And maybe you haven't even thought about it much. I don't think we added that. I wish we had it, just like haven't considered it. So I wish I could add an F real quick. But I'm gonna wait a sec. I'm interested to see. I mean, if we had to make a guess here, because we can't see the results yet, what do we think is going to be top and second top choice?
I think probably C. That's what we hear about the most, I think, is just is the data protected? Is it safe? You know, this is really sensitive private data. We're getting into conversations that could touch on healthcare issues, that certainly touch on, you know, a lot of financial decisions, financial data. So my prediction is probably C.
All right.
Okay.
Mike, something? All right, I'm gonna go to it. Okay. Aha. All right. So
I didn't get it.
Second. Yeah, lack of understanding or expertise in AI. So we're not even at the concerns over privacy and security. We are still trying to figure out, you know, what AI is, how to use it. And that I think that also makes sense. I think maybe once you solve for A, you then start to worry about the concerns over data privacy. So yeah, I mean, this is some good food for thought that, you know, clearly there's a lot of discovery here of understanding AI. So it seems like part of this is educational, and maybe part of this is, you know, so like, how do I use AI? How would I do it? And then the other sorts of problems start to appear. So it looks like we're really early, actually, judging from the audience reactions. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
I'm thinking about why I got this wrong. And I think that our sample is a little biased, because if they're talking to us, they're at least comfortable enough to engage with us, right? So they've maybe gotten past a little bit of that first, and now they're thinking about more of the logistics of how do we make sure if we do use AI that it's safe, you know, et cetera. So yeah, in retrospect, this makes a ton of sense.
Well, I think too, if you look at, there's got to be a problem that's going to drive change, right? So is it a challenge? Is it growth? I think a lot of the firms that are looking at AI are the ones that already have capacity constraints, because they're trying to figure out how do we then create more capacity, or you know, like you said, Parker, maybe free up some time to spend with my family. And in order then to figure out what's out there, you've got to then create capacity to do the due diligence and to even evaluate like what options are in the market, like what's new. Like I see stuff all the time that I didn't know existed. Then, oh, we've been around for 2 years. Like, I didn't even know you know, this was an option. So it's really hard if you can't create the capacity to do the due diligence, to look at what's out there, to think about applying it. So I think if you want to go down this road, you're going to be better off with some type of guide, you know, who can help you just present some ideas and then tackle it very systematically. You can't do all of this at once. So let's figure out where the biggest roadblocks and challenges are. Let's apply technology or AI to that. We're going to start with one thing, and then we're going to look for whatever's going to have the largest ROI. And so a lot of that can be around like portfolio trading and automation of that and tax management. Like that's a great place to start, because that might be where 20 to 30% of your time is. Well, now if you can automate that, you have that 20 to 30%. You've got to dedicate that then to figuring out, okay, what else is out there and where should we go next on the process? And then let's get one thing done, and then we'll move to the next. But it's a lot, and I think it's hard to do because look, business and life, the daily challenges, they just get in the way of all the grand plans of how we're going to create like a better system and a differentiated solution and grow. And we're going to do all these cool things, but like, you know, that journey of 1,000 miles, one step. I mean, that one step is really hard if you're already oversubscribed with your capacity through just managing your existing clients.
Mike, what, like, for a of any size, but a small or even large advisory firm, like what is the best, you know, in your opinion, step to integrating AI or thinking about AI without overwhelming team and, you know, with budget considerations? There's obviously a lot of considerations that goes into this.
Yeah, don't get caught up with the next shiny object. Spend the time to go through a process evaluation and understanding where time is being spent and what type of, when I say ROI on the time being invested, because that's the most valuable asset of an advisor. You know, whether you're going through and managing daily across a client's householded accounts to manage for taxes and risk and tracking error, like that might take you 30 hours. But when you're then presenting in front of the client, does the client know it takes 30 hours? Like, would the client have the same response? Would they put the same value on it? Whether you did it manually by hand the same way you've been doing it for 30 years, or if you set up technology like AI to be able to automate and optimize and run those trades for you, they're not going to know. So until you go through that evaluation of where's our time being spent, where do we think we could have a better solution, how do we provide more wow or value to our clients, or how do we reach more until you work through like where the bottlenecks and gaps are, like you probably shouldn't be evaluating any shiny new objects until you get a pretty good idea of what needs to be addressed that's holding you up from achieving your goals.
Parker, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions advisors have about implementing AI into their workflows?
Yeah. And maybe I can speak to these as maybe with bring some optimism and kind of take some of the pressure off here. So I think a lot of the conversation around AI has been AI in the abstract, like AI will change everything. AI could change the way that we work. AI is going to be everywhere. I think the way that this will actually come to advisors and come to wealth management is it's not going to feel like AI is here. It's going to feel like, oh, like my software can now do really interesting things that it couldn't do before. And you'll start seeing in your software that it can handle data it couldn't handle before. It can give you outputs that it couldn't do before. And maybe most interesting, over the next few years, you'll start to see that the software can actually do work for you. So I'll give you just one example. One of the things that we do in the Jump software is you'll have your client meeting, and at the end of the meeting, the AI assistant is basically looking for anything in that conversation that sounds like it should be a next action based on the conversation. So if during the meeting the advisor says, "Hey, I'm going to get you that document by Thursday," or we're going to send you an engagement agreement, by Wednesday. It's going to pull that out and it's going to format that. And then the team or the advisor can look at that list of suggested action items and they can push those into the CRM. So that's kind of like today. So it's like, hey, here are all the things you said you're going to do. It's automatically extracted. You can organize those and push those into your CRM and do them. Well, the next step is, why can't we get AI to actually start doing that work, right? So for example, if it's, hey, you said that you're going to send this insurance application to help save them some time. Well, why can't AI just fill out that application and maybe it knows even where to submit it? And so instead of this human step, it's just an easy button that's like, yeah, do that for me. And those are some of the things that we're starting to work on, is how do we not just tell you what the next steps are, but how do we actually do them for you? So I think you'll see more and more of that. And you won't even really be thinking, oh, wow, that's really cool AI. It's like, wow, this software just did work for me. That's fantastic. And so I think it'll just come organically in that way. It won't be this AI is here. It's not like Wall-E shows up necessarily.
All right. I think, yeah. So like wrapping that up, it seems like there's the desire of, getting started, and it seems like talking to both of you is a good way to learn more individually. So please, everyone, reach out to these two to figure that out. And then the other side is like, there's a world where it's, increasingly, and this is just not just for work, but also like life administration, kind of like do it for me and help me do it. That's the way I've kind of like bucketed those two things for a while now. So we're now going to move on to our final poll question. And this is just, based on what you've heard today, your own conceptions, how long do you feel like it will take to get, an AI process implemented? So I'm curious to see, what everyone's kind of anticipation is of the work and time it takes. And of course, just think of like the solution you might be thinking of or envisioning, not just, like imagine, like, oh, I wish it could do this. Like maybe how long would it take to get that fully up and running? I'm just now seeing choice E. It's impossible. And that might be impossible for some people, for some workflows. I mean, there's always a need for the human in the loop for everything. So interesting. So let's see. How are we doing on questions? All right. Need some of you to click buttons so we can keep talking. And someone just asked, will we receive a copy of this webinar? Yes, you will get that in your email. And then once we get to the next question, we will discuss how each of you, Mike and Parker, can spend 30 seconds on how you'd help us. I like that question. So we'll be entering like the final Q&A portion there. All right, I'm gonna press forward. So, okay, so let's see here. We've got a day, 6 months, a year. It's someone did the impossible. Okay, I want to hear from that person. Okay, so we have a day, 8.2%, a month, 15%, 6 months. Okay, so most people think it's going to be about a 6 month thing. So that means if you believe you started the day because holidays, you'd be looking at maybe mid-year 2025 to have an AI solution. What do you guys think about this? Does this fit into your timeframes? Project dependent? Are there certain things that can be implemented in a day or a week or a month? And maybe kind of break down like the bigger picture, and then what are some, maybe baby steps, or is this like, hey, you need to approach this all at once? Love to hear. Maybe start with you, Parker.
Yeah, so I'll speak to our category, which is applying AI to meetings. You can kind of choose your own adventure. So on the one end of the spectrum, Morgan Stanley built their own system in-house. It's called Debrief. They spent multi-millions of dollars on it. They hired a big kind of outsourced software development firm to do it. It does some of what, our software does, and that took them, about 6 months. So that's a pretty good guess. On the other end of the spectrum, if you go grab something that's off the shelf, ready-made for advisors, like what we do at Jump, which has the integrations already, it's got the workflows already, it's got the AI already set up for an advisor, that can be actually set up in a day. I mean, assuming once you get to the point where you've picked someone to work with, but that can be set up in a day. So I think there's a pretty wide range there. And again, that's just limited to our domain. Could be different in other areas, but I think there's a lot of off-the-shelf solutions that are available now that are industry specific that can save a ton of time.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that, and I'm proof of it. It's one day. You start with the easy, low-hanging fruit, right? So I use Jump. It took me one day. It integrates to HubSpot. Like, it took literally zero brain power to get it set up and use it. Now I use it for every meeting. You can use things like Wealth Management GPT will help you write content, right? It's low cost. Like, this stuff's not going to burn your budget. You're throwing down a credit card. So start with the easy stuff. Get used to it a little bit. Work on things that are trials that you don't have to go through an integration step, and then work your way through as you start figuring it out. But you got to get comfortable first.
What are some of the things that would take more of a month or 6 months? And, kind of maybe walk through the trade-offs and considerations and ultimately, that longer term upside of kind of that integration. I mean, we've got a question about data privacy and E&O, cover or leave us exposed, secondary concern is too much. So it seems there's kind of like, continued concerns about data privacy for some of these things. Maybe some of these off-the-shelf tools, Jump, others do solve for some of these things, but maybe there's others where there's more consideration baked into it.
Yeah, so I think, sorry, what's the question again?
Do you see the Q&A box? You can pop it open.
Yeah.
I can hop in. So really when you think about what's going to take longer is if you're redoing like a core process. So I work with firms that are reimagining the way they run their client portfolio management process. How do we take the output from the financial planning software? How do we use things that can help create either custom portfolios or figure out what the allocation should be so it aligns with the plan, the client needs, the account values, the firm's market views? Do they want to use private assets or not? Do they want to implement new products? Like, do we want to trade it automatically, right? So you might look at a firm like a Smartleaf that can do that, or Advast or Advise on or Smart. Like, you've got to look at when you're going to change something big where there's a lot of operational processes or maybe new products and new procedures, like that's going to take you that 6 months, like 3 to 6 of testing implementation, especially when you're integrating new tech. And the other stuff though can be pretty short. And I know we're a little bit over on time. I think one of the questions came in, how do we help? So me personally, like you can go to my website, evo-wealth.com. There's a whole bunch of content. We've got a emerging technology wealth solutions guide that you can browse through. We're creating more content all the time that's very short. That just kind of helps bring up the education level and awareness of what's out there and how would you use it and what are the benefits. So that's kind of my approach, and I can do consulting with specific firms, if they really want to approach this in a methodology, in a kind of set way. What's our short and long-term strategy, and how do we get somebody to help us figure that out and then implement it? That's how I'll work with firms from a consulting perspective.
Yeah, and on our side, so Mike is a consultant that can kind of help, make smart decisions about what to adopt and why and when. We're more of a solution provider. So Jump is software. You would buy it kind of per advisor. It is AI that is made for advisors. It integrates with your tech stack, and it is specifically around the problem of we spend so much time preparing for meetings and doing all the follow-up work after a meeting. So we essentially capture the audio from your meeting in a compliant, safe, privacy-first way, and then we process the data from the meeting and give you a 95% final draft on the CRM update, the recap email that would go back to the client, the internal note that would be good for kind of compliance documentation, the task list, which can be pushed into the CRM as a task or a workflow. We extract all the financial planning data. So it's just a way to be much more efficient around client meetings. And that's a software offering. And if you'd like to kind of check that out, our website is jumpapp, jumpapp.com, and happy to share more info about that.
And again, Mike says Evo Wealth. That's EVEO-wealth.com. I think someone said they didn't hear that. So evo-wealth.com. And again, there's a couple other resources available for download on the side. And as always, please respond to the survey. Very helpful to guide us continually improve and get feedback to do better every time. All right.
Maybe
Thanks
just one
everyone
last
for joining us.
comment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just am kind of scanning the Q&A, and I see a lot of kind of questions and concerns about kind of the privacy stuff. And my short answer there is, you're seeing big independent broker dealers like LPL, kind of bulge bracket banks like Morgan Stanley, and scaled RIAs like Sanctuary and others that are adopting these tools. So they have way more lawyers than any of us will ever have. And so I think you can kind of rest assured there is a path to do it in a compliant way. It's just figuring out how to do it.
Yeah, it's true. There's definitely enterprise tools that are built custom, and then we have Google Suite. There's lots of tools that are starting to implement AI for like personal use, and then there's a blending, and ultimately this technology is more equitably distributed, and more people can use it. So that's kind of the plus. And yeah, this is happening across every industry, right? Every tangent of the world. I cover robotics, and even these very ancient quote unquote industries are robotics in Japan, for example, very traditional. Like they're looking at how to use AI, and they're very much a conservative angle of approaching this. So it does seem like that, we're at this point where it's a good time to be considering this and looking at it. And with that, we're going to wrap up. Thanks everyone for joining us. Mike, Parker, great to have you on. Hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. This would be our Thanksgiving meeting. So have a great one, and goodbye.